I returned from the dead to find my daughter scrubbing floors in the castle I built for her. She looked at me with hollow eyes and handed me a stale crust of bread, thinking I was a beggar. She did not know that the man standing in the rain was not a beggar, but a ghost with $800 million and a thirst for vengeance. Before I burn their world to the ground, let me tell you how it began. My name is Conrad. I am 75 years old. For the last 15 years, the world believed I was rotting in a foreign prison or buried in an unmarked grave in Angola. They were half right. I was in hell, but I clawed my way out. I survived political coups, disease, and betrayal to return to the only thing that kept me alive. My daughter Lily. The night I returned to Boston, the sky was weeping. A relentless, freezing rain battered the cobblestone streets of Beacon Hill. I stood on the sidewalk, pulling the collar of my worn coat tight against my neck. I looked up at the house, number 42. It was a masterpiece of red brick and black shutters, a $4.5 million fortress I had purchased cash 15 years ago. I bought this house for Lily to ensure she would always be safe, to ensure she would live like a princess while I was away securing our future. My hands trembled, not from the cold, but from a terrifying hope. I imagined her opening the door. She would be 35 now. Maybe she was married. Maybe there were grandchildren running through the halls. I adjusted my hat. I had not shaved in weeks, and my clothes were travel-worn intentional camouflage for a man traveling with a fortune in uncut diamonds sewn into the lining of his jacket. I walked up the granite steps. My heart hammered against my ribs like a prisoner demanding release. I pressed the brass doorbell. The sound echoed inside, deep and familiar. I waited. The door did not open immediately. I heard shouting from inside. A woman's shrill voice screaming insults. Then the heavy oak door creaked open just a crack. A woman stood there. She was thin, skeletal. Her face was gray and lined, prematurely aged by exhaustion. She wore a maid's uniform that was 2 sizes too big, the fabric frayed at the collar. She held a plastic bucket of dirty gray water in one hand and a rag in the other. Her hands. I stared at her hands. They were red raw and cracked, bleeding from the cold and harsh chemicals. "Can I help you, sir?" Her voice was a whisper, trembling with fear. I opened my mouth to say her name, but the words died in my throat. I looked into her eyes. They were the same honey-brown eyes of my wife. The same eyes I had kissed goodbye 15 years ago. It was Lily, my Lily. But there was no recognition in her gaze. She looked at me and saw only a homeless old man seeking shelter from the storm. She did not see her father. She saw a fellow sufferer. "Please, sir, you cannot be here," she whispered, looking over her shoulder, terrified. "If the mistress sees you, she will be angry. Please go to the back alley." She reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a hard, dry roll of bread. She pressed it into my hand, her fingers cold as ice. "Take this. It is all I have. Please go before she comes." I stood frozen. The bread felt heavy in my hand like a stone. My daughter, the heiress to an empire, was feeding me scraps and trembling like a beaten dog in the doorway of her own home. "Who is at the door, Lily?" The voice came from the top of the stairs. It was a voice I had not heard in 15 years, but I would recognize it in the depths of hell. Pamela, my late wife's sister, the woman I had trusted to manage the estate, the woman I had sworn to protect my family. Lily flinched as if she had been struck. "It is nobody, ma'am. Just a beggar. I am sending him away." "A beggar?" Pamela laughed. The sound was sharp and cruel, like breaking glass. She descended the stairs. She was 65 but looked younger thanks to expensive surgeries and the soft life of a parasite. She wore a silk dressing gown that I knew cost more than a car, and diamonds glittered on her fingers. Let me see him. I do not want vagrants marking my property. Pamela pushed the door wide open. She loomed over Lily, shoving her aside with a look of pure disgust. Then she looked at me. I expected shock. I expected fear. I expected her to scream, seeing a dead man standing on her porch. But Pamela did not scream. She squinted her eyes, scanning my face, my ragged beard, my cheap clothes. Then a slow, twisted smile spread across her face. Well, well. Look what the tide washed up. She leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. Conrad, I thought you would have died in a ditch by now. You know me, I said, my voice rough, unused to speaking English after so long. Know you, she scoffed. You look like a rat, Conrad. A dirty old rat. What are you doing here? Did you escape prison just to come beg at my door? I looked at Lily. She was staring at me, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with confusion and horror. Father, she whispered. No, my father ran away. He is a criminal. He stole millions and left us to rot. The words hit me harder than any bullet. This was the narrative Pamela had spun. This was the poison she had fed my daughter for 15 years. Pamela laughed again, delighted by the pain on my face. See, Conrad, even your daughter knows what you are. A thief, a coward, and now a beggar. She stepped back and gestured with her hand, a mocking invitation. Come in, Conrad. Do not stand in the rain. You are dirtying my porch. Come to the kitchen. I am feeling generous today. I will give you 5 minutes before I call the police. I stepped over the threshold. I entered the house I had bought. The marble floors were polished to a shine. The chandelier I had imported from Italy sparkled overhead. But the air was stale. It smelled of expensive perfume, covering the stench of rot. Lily closed the door behind me. She would not look at me. She picked up her bucket and rag, keeping her head bowed like a servant in the presence of royalty. To the kitchen. Pamela barked, snapping her fingers at me. Use the service entrance. Do not walk on the rugs. I followed her. I walked past the living room, where a fire crackled in the hearth. I saw a man sitting there. Brandon, Pamela's son. He was 38 now. He sat with his feet up on the coffee table, drinking my vintage scotch. He didn't even look up. We went down to the kitchen. It was vast and cold. Pamela sat on a stool at the island, looking down at me. Lily stood in the corner, squeezing the rag in her red hands, waiting for orders. So, Pamela said, examining her manicure. You are alive. What a disappointment. I assume you want money. I want to know why my daughter is wearing a uniform. I said, my voice low and dangerous. I want to know why she is scrubbing floors in the house I bought for her. Pamela let out a sharp bark of laughter. You bought this house with stolen money, Conrad. And when you fled the country, the government froze everything. The debts you left behind were astronomical. Lies. I had left 0 debts. I had left millions in a trust fund. We lost everything because of you. Pamela hissed, leaning forward. I had to use my own savings to save this house. I had to raise your daughter when you abandoned her. And this is how she repays me. By working. She pointed a manicured finger at Lily. She works to pay off the debt you left Conrad. She works because she is useless for anything else. She has no education, no skills, just like her father. I looked at Lily. She was crying silently, tears tracking through the dirt on her cheeks. Is this true, Lily? I asked. She nodded her head, jerky and scared. Aunt Pamela saved us. She gave us a roof when you left us with nothing. I owe her everything. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. The rage was a physical thing, a hot iron in my chest. Pamela had not just stolen my money. She had stolen my daughter's mind. She had rewritten history, turning me into the villain and herself into the savior, while she enslaved my child. I took a breath. I forced my hands to relax. If I killed her now, I would go to prison for real, and Lily would be lost forever. I needed to be smart. I needed to be the predator, not the prey. I slumped my shoulders. I let my head hang. I adopted the posture of a defeated, broken old man. I did not know. I stammered. I lost everything, Pamela. The police in Angola, they took it all. I have nothing. I just wanted to see her. Pamela looked at me with pure contempt. Good. You are exactly where you belong. In the dirt. She reached into her purse and pulled out a money clip. She peeled off 2 $100 bills and threw them on the floor at my feet. Here, take it. Take phone. Consider it payment for disappearing. I stared at the money on the white tiles. $200. The price of a cheap dinner for her. The price of my dignity. Take it, she shouted. And then get out. If I see you near this house again, I will call the cops and tell them the fugitive has returned. Do you think anyone will believe you over me? I am a respected member of the community. You are a ghost. Lily made a small sound in the corner. Please, she whispered. Just take it and go, please. She was begging me to leave to save me. She thought she was protecting me from the police. Even now, after everything, she still had a heart. I slowly bent down. My knees cracked. I reached out and picked up the bills. I felt the humiliation burn my skin, but I held on to it. I would use this anger. I would forge it into a weapon. Thank you, I mumbled. Now get out. Pamela said, turning her back on me. Lily, show him the back door, and then scrub this floor again. He left mud everywhere. Lily led me to the service door. When we were out of Pamela's sight, she grabbed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Do not come back. She hissed, her eyes intense. She is not lying. She knows the police chief. She knows judges. They will lock you up and throw away the key. Why do you stay, Lily? I asked. Why do you let her treat you this way? She looked away, a shadow crossing her face. It is not just about me, she whispered. It is Leo. Leo. My son, she said softly. Your grandson. He is sick. He has a heart condition. Aunt Pamela pays for his medicine. If I leave, if I stop working, he dies. The final piece of the puzzle snapped into place. They were not just holding her with debt. They were holding her with a hostage. My grandson. A boy I didn't know existed. I looked at my daughter. I wanted to hold her. I wanted to tell her that I could buy this entire city block. I wanted to tell her that Leo's medicine would never be a problem again. But not yet. She was too terrified. She would not believe me. Or worse, she would inadvertently tip off Pamela. I understand, I said. I will go. I squeezed her hand one last time. I watched her close the door, watched the lock click shut. I stood alone in the alley. The rain soaked through my coat, but I didn't feel it. I reached into my pocket. Not for the $200, but for the small black device I had palmed from my pocket and stuck under the lip of the kitchen island while I was bending down to pick up the money. A military-grade listening device. I walked to the end of the alley. A black sedan pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. Mr. Hartman, my lawyer. He looked at me, his face grim. Get in, Conrad, he said. I climbed into the warm leather interior of the car. I peeled off the fake beard and wiped the rain from my face. Did you see her? Hartman asked. I saw her, I said, my voice ice cold. And And they are going to pay, I said. They are going to pay for every second my daughter spent on her knees. I pulled out my phone and activated the app linked to the bug in the kitchen. Drive, I told Hartman. Take me to the hotel. I have a war to plan. As the car pulled away, I heard Pamela's voice through the speaker crystal clear. Can you believe the nerve of him, Brandon? Coming here like a rat. I heard the clink of a glass. Brandon's voice. Did he buy it, Mom? Hook, line, and sinker. Pamela laughed. He thinks he is a fugitive. He doesn't know the charges were dropped 10 years ago, and he certainly doesn't know about the trust fund. And the girl? Brandon asked. She is terrified. She thinks he is going to ruin everything. She will work twice as hard now just to keep us happy so we don't call the cops on her daddy. Perfect. Brandon chuckled. Pour me another drink, Mom. To Conrad. The gift that keeps on giving. I stared out the window at the rain-streaked city. Laugh while you can, I whispered, because I am not the man who left. I am the man who survived, and I am going to take everything. Start the clock. Hartman, they have 48 hours before their world ends. I sat in the darkness of the hotel suite staring at the small black speaker on the mahogany table. It was the only connection I had to the house on Beacon Hill, the house that had become a prison for my daughter. Beside me, Hartman sorted through legal documents, but his eyes kept darting to the device. We were waiting for evidence. We were waiting for a slip-up. What we got was a window into hell. The audio feed crackled. I heard the distinct sound of heavy footsteps on the marble floor. It was Brandon. I recognized his gait even through the audio feed, heavy and arrogant. Then I heard a door open and the soft, terrified voice of my daughter. Brandon, please. Lily's voice was shaking so hard it barely registered as human. It sounded like a wounded animal. I need the money for the pharmacy. Leo is wheezing again. The inhaler is empty. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. Leo. My grandson. The boy I had never met. The boy whose life hung by a thread held by these monsters. I heard the clink of a bottle against a glass. Brandon was drinking. He was always drinking. You are always asking for something, Lily. His voice was slurred, thick with expensive red wine and cruelty. Money for food. Money for clothes. Now money for medicine. You are an expensive pet to keep. He is not a pet, Brandon. He is your nephew. He is 8 years old. He cannot breathe. Please, the prescription is $200. I will work extra hours. I will clean the basement again. Just give me the cash. There was a pause, a long, agonizing silence where the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in that distant kitchen. Then I heard the sound of liquid splashing onto the floor. A wet, heavy splatter. Oops, Brandon said. His tone was mockingly innocent. Look at that, Comtuse. I spilled my Chateau Margaux. That is a $500 bottle, Lily. A lot more than your little brat's medicine. I heard Lily gasp. Clean it up, Brandon commanded. I heard the rustle of fabric as if she was reaching for a towel. No. Brandon stopped her. Not with a rag. With your tongue. The air in the hotel room seemed to vanish. I stopped breathing. I looked at Hartman. His face was pale, his jaw set like stone. He reached out a hand as if to steady me, but I did not move. I was frozen in a rage so pure it felt like ice in my veins. What? Lily whispered. You heard me. You want the money for the boy. You want him to breathe tonight. Then you show me how grateful you are. Lick it up, every drop. And maybe if the floor is clean enough, I will think about giving you that cash. There was silence. I closed my eyes, imagining my daughter, my proud, beautiful Lily, on her hands and knees. I imagined the degradation, the humiliation. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to that house and tear Brandon apart with my bare hands. But I couldn't. Not yet. If I acted now, I would save her for a night but lose the war. I needed to destroy them completely. "Please, Brandon, don't do this," she was sobbing now. "Do it," he roared, "or the kid suffocates. It is your choice. The clock is ticking." Then came the sound. The most horrific sound I have ever heard in my 75 years on this earth. The sound of my daughter weeping softly as she lowered herself to the floor. The wet sound of her complying with his demand. "Good girl." Brandon laughed softly. "See, that wasn't so hard. You know the funny thing, Lily? I hold that boy's life in the palm of my hand. You run, you hide, you try to leave, and I stop paying. I cut off the insurance, I cut off the meds, and you watch him turn blue. Remember that while you taste that vintage." The audio feed went silent save for the sound of Brandon walking away, whistling. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the Boston skyline. The glass reflected a man I barely recognized. A man with eyes dead enough to kill. "Get the car, Hartman," I said. My voice was a whisper, but it filled the room. "Where are we going, Conrad?" "To the house." "No. To the hospital. I need to know exactly what leverage they have on her. I need to know about this debt." We drove to Mercy Hospital, the facility mentioned in the dossiers Hartman had compiled. It was a massive complex of glass and steel, a place of healing that Pamela and her son had turned into a tool of extortion. I walked into the lobby wearing a suit that cost more than most people earned in a year. I walked with the cane I didn't really need, using it to clear a path through the crowd. Hartman was at my side, his briefcase a shield. We went straight to the billing administration. The receptionist tried to stop us, telling us we needed an appointment. Hartman placed a business card on the desk. It was heavy cardstock, embossed with gold. "My client wishes to speak with the director of billing regarding the account of Leo Vance. Immediately. Or we will be speaking with the board of directors about your compliance violations." 5 minutes later, we were sitting in a plush office across from a nervous-looking administrator named Mr. Henderson. He looked at me, then at Hartman, then back at me. He could smell the money. He could smell the danger. "Mr. Conrad," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead, "I was not aware you were back in the country. We have not seen you in 15 years, I cut him off. "Let us skip the pleasantries. My daughter Lily believes she owes this hospital $2 million for the care of my grandson Leo. She believes she is drowning in debt. I want to see the ledger." Henderson looked confused. He tapped on his keyboard, his brow furrowing. $2 million. "That is impossible, sir." "Show me," I demanded. He turned the screen. I leaned in my eyes, scanning the columns of numbers. I saw the treatments, the surgeries, the specialized cardiac care. Leo had been a sick boy since birth. The costs were astronomical. But then I looked at the column on the right. The column marked balance due. It was 0. I stared at the number. "0, explain," I said. "Mr. Conrad," Henderson said, his voice trembling slightly. "You set up the Emerald Trust 20 years ago before you left. It was an irrevocable trust designed to cover all medical and educational expenses for any of your direct descendants. The trust pays the bills automatically. It has been paying for Leo's care since the day he was born. There is no debt. There never was." I felt the room spin. The trust. I had forgotten the specific clauses I had written into it decades ago, a failsafe I had created in case I died overseas. I had protected them and I didn't even know it. "But if the trust pays," I said slowly, my voice shaking with suppressed fury. "Why does my daughter think she owes you millions? Why does she work as a slave to pay a debt that does not exist?" Henderson clicked a few more keys. He pulled up a correspondence log. We send monthly statements, sir. Addressed to Lily at the Beacon Hill residence. Confirming payment. Confirming zero balance. Who signs for them? I asked. He opened a digital file. Scanned images of certified mail receipts appeared on the screen. I looked at the signature. It was a scrawl I knew well. It wasn't Lily's. It was Pamela's. Every month for 8 years, Pamela had signed for the letters. She had intercepted the good news. She had taken the statements showing a zero balance and shredded them. And then she and Brandon had forged new bills. They had created fake invoices with terrifying red ink and stamping them with overdue and final notice. They had created a paper monster to terrify a young mother. They let her believe her son was dying and that she was the only thing standing between him and the street. They let her scrub floors and lick wine off tiles to pay a debt that I had already paid 20 years ago. Can I see him? I asked Henderson. Is he here now? He is in the pediatric wing. Routine observation for his breathing. He is stable thanks to the treatments. Take me to him. We walked through the sterile corridors. The smell of antiseptic filled my nose. We reached room 304. I stopped at the observation window. Inside, a small boy was sitting up in bed. He had tubes in his nose and a monitor clipped to his finger. He was pale and small for his age, his chest rising and falling with a labored rhythm. He was reading a book about dinosaurs. He looked exactly like me at that age. The same stubborn jaw, the same dark hair. I pressed my hand against the glass. This was my blood. This was the boy Brandon had threatened to let suffocate. This was the leverage they used to break my daughter. Hartman stood beside me. They committed mail fraud, Conrad. Wire fraud. Extortion. This is 20 years in federal prison. It is not enough, I whispered. Prison is too good for them. They took 15 years of my life away. They took my daughter's youth. They took this boy's peace. I don't want them in a cell, Hartman. I want them in the ground. Metaphorically speaking, of course. I turned away from the window. The image of the boy burned into my mind. Do not tell Lily yet, I said. Hartman looked surprised. Why? You could free her right now. You could tell her the debt is a lie. If I tell her now, she will react. She will scream at them. She will show her hand, and they will run. Or worse, they will hurt her before we can stop them. They still have physical control of the house. They still have access to her. I walked toward the exit, my cane clicking rhythmically on the linoleum. I need them to feel safe. I need them to think they have won. I need Pamela to sign that contract selling the house, because once she signs, she commits a crime that cannot be undone. She claims ownership of something that isn't hers. And the boy? Hartman asked. Hire private security, I said. Round the clock. If Brandon or Pamela step 1 foot into this hospital, if they even look at this boy wrong, I want them stopped. But be discreet. Lily must not know. Not until tomorrow. We walked out into the rain. The city lights blurred in the mist. I felt lighter than I had in years. The mystery was gone. The power dynamic had shifted. They thought they held the keys to the kingdom, but they were just squatters in a house of cards. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photo of Brandon I had taken from the surveillance feed. The man who made my daughter lick the floor. Enjoy your wine, Brandon, I said to the screen. Drink deep, because tomorrow you are going to choke on it. I got into the car. Hartman, get the forger ready, and call the contacts at the IRS. It is time to introduce Pamela to the consequences of her lifestyle. We drove away, leaving the hospital behind, but taking the truth with us. The debt was a lie. The slavery was a scam. And the reckoning was coming faster than they could ever imagine. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 15 years, I allowed myself to smile. It was a cold, terrible smile. The smile of a man who holds the axe and is just waiting for the neck to be exposed. I stood before the glass doors of the law firm that once represented my empire. The gold lettering on the door hadn't changed, but the man inside certainly had. I wasn't here as the wealthy client I used to be. I was here as the ghost, the beggar, the problem that needed to be swept under the rug. I adjusted my coat. It smelled of rain and old sweat, a scent I had carefully curated for this performance. I needed to look like a man who had been broken by the world, a man who had no fight left in him. I needed them to underestimate me one last time. The receptionist looked up as I entered. Her nose wrinkled slightly. "Deliveries are in the back," she said, without looking me in the eye. "I am here to see Mr. Clive." I rasped. "Tell him Conrad is here. Tell him the dead man has returned." Her eyes went wide. She picked up the phone, whispering frantically. A moment later, the double doors swung open. A man walked out. He was fat now, balding, wearing a suit that strained against his gut. Clive. The man I had paid a retainer of $10,000 a month for years to protect my interests. He stopped 10 feet away from me. He didn't look scared. He looked annoyed, like I was a stain on his expensive carpet. "Conrad," he said. "I heard rumors. I didn't think they were true." "I need help, Clive," I said, letting my voice crack. "I have nowhere to go, Pamela. She threw me out. You were my lawyer. You have to help me." He laughed. A short, dry bark. "Come in, but don't touch anything." I followed him into his office. It was plush, filled with leather and mahogany. I sat on the edge of the chair, hunching my shoulders. I saw him eye me with contempt. He sat behind his massive desk, steepling his fingers. "Help you?" he asked. "With what?" "You are a fugitive, Conrad. You are lucky I don't call the feds right now." "I just want my pension," I pleaded. "I just want access to my old accounts. Just enough to get a small apartment. Maybe help Lily." Clive leaned back, a cruel smile playing on his lips. He opened a drawer and pulled out a cigar, taking his time to light it. He blew smoke toward the ceiling, savoring his power over the man who used to sign his paychecks. "There are no accounts, Conrad," he said softly. "And there is no pension. You see, legally speaking, you don't exist." I looked at him, feigning confusion. "What do you mean?" "5 years ago," Clive said, examining the ash of his cigar. "We petitioned the court. Absentia for 10 years. Presumed dead. We had a nice little funeral for you. Closed casket, obviously." "Dead," I whispered. "But I am here." "On paper you are dust," he said. "And when a man dies, his assets transfer. The house on Beacon Hill. It transferred to your next of kin. But since Lily was incapacitated by grief and financial incompetence, Pamela graciously stepped in as trustee. We transferred the deed to her name to protect the asset." "To protect it," I repeated. "You gave my house to her. We saved it." He corrected. "From the government. From creditors. From your daughter, who would have spent it all on... Well, she is not exactly bright, is she? Pamela is the owner now, legal and binding." I stared at him. He was confessing to fraud. He was admitting that he had forged documents to steal my estate while I was rotting in a cell. He felt safe telling me this because he thought I was a penniless old man with no resources to fight him. "But that is fraud," I said, my voice trembling. "That is my house. I bought it." Clive stood up. He walked around the desk and leaned against it, looming over me. "Who are they going to believe, Conrad? Me, a partner at one of the city's top firms, or a dirty old man who claims to be a diamond tycoon returned from the grave? You have no ID. You have no money. You have no fingerprints on file that haven't been flagged by Interpol. You are a ghost, and ghosts don't own property. He walked to the door and opened it. Get out. If you come back, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. And Conrad, do yourself a favor. Leave town. Pamela isn't as nice as I am. I stood up slowly, leaning heavily on my cane. I shuffled toward the door. Please, I said. Just tell her I was here. Tell her I just wanted to help Lily. I will tell her. He sneered. Now go. I walked out of the office. I walked past the receptionist. I walked out of the building and into the bustling street. I turned the corner and stopped. I straightened my back. The tremble in my hands vanished. I pulled the burner phone from my pocket. I had been recording since I walked in. But that wasn't enough. I needed the link. I needed the conspiracy. I waited. I knew what he would do. He was a coward and a gossip. He would call her immediately. I put on my headphones. The bug I had planted in his office, a tiny adhesive disc I had slapped onto the underside of his chair while I was pretending to struggle to sit down, went live. I heard the tone of a phone dialing, then Pamela's voice. What is it, Clive? I am busy preparing for the gala. He was here, Clive said. His voice was no longer arrogant. It was nervous. Conrad. He came to my office. I told you he was back, Pamela snapped. Did he ask about the deed? He begged for money. Clive laughed, the nervousness fading. He looks terrible, Pam. Like a homeless bum. He has no idea about the trust or the transfer. I told him he was legally dead. You should have seen his face. Did he threaten legal action? With what money? Clive scoffed. He can't even afford a shave, let alone a retainer. Don't worry. The paperwork is ironclad. I forged the death certificate myself, remember. The coroner owes me. And the transfer of the deed. Your signature on the power of attorney looked better than his real one. Good, Pamela said. He is just a nuisance. But keep an eye on him. If he gets too close to the gala, have security remove him. I don't want him upsetting the donors. Relax. He is broken. He is walking away with his tail between his legs. We won, Pam. The house is yours. The money is yours. And the girl, well, she isn't going anywhere. She better not. Pamela hissed. I need her to serve the champagne tonight. Make sure the paperwork for the sale is ready for tomorrow. Once we get that cash buyer, we take the money and disappear before anyone asks too many questions. The papers are ready. Just get the girl to sign the waiver. Threaten the kid again if you have to. Done. See you tonight, Clive. The line went dead. I took off the headphones. I stood there on the busy sidewalk, people rushing past me, ignoring the old man in the dirty coat. They didn't know they were walking past a volcano about to erupt. I had it all. The admission of forgery, the collusion, the intent to sell, the blackmail of my daughter. Clive thought I was broken. He thought I was walking away. I looked up at the glass tower where he sat smoking his cigar, thinking he was a god. I am not walking away, Clive, I whispered. I am just getting a bigger hammer. I hailed a cab. The Grand Hotel. I told the driver. I needed to change. The beggar was done. It was time for the tycoon to make an entrance. But first, I had to stop a sale. I had to stop them from liquidating the only roof my daughter had left. And to do that, I needed to become the one thing they couldn't resist. A buyer. I dialed Hartman. It is done, I said. I have the recording. He admitted to forging the death certificate and the deed transfer. That is 20 years in prison for him. Hartman said, his voice satisfyingly grim. Do we move now? No, I said. Not yet. They want to sell the house tomorrow. They are desperate for cash. Let us give them what they want. Conrad. Set up the shell company, Hartman. Make them an offer they cannot refuse. $8 million. Cash. Fast close. I want them drooling. I want them so blinded by greed that they sign their own death warrants. And the condition. The condition is that they need the waiver from the previous heir. They need Lily's signature. They will force her to sign it tonight. And when they do, I will be there. You are playing a dangerous game, Conrad. I am not playing Hartman. I am hunting. I hung up. I looked at the recording on my phone. The voice of the man who sold my life for a commission. Don't worry, he had said. He has no money to hire a lawyer. I laughed. A cold, hard sound that made the cab driver glance at me in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to hire a lawyer. I owned the law firm that was going to destroy him. Tonight, Pamela was holding a gala, a party to celebrate her benevolence, a party where my daughter would be paraded as a servant. It was time to crash the party. I shaved the beard. I washed the grime of the street from my skin. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the face of a man who used to command armies of miners. The eyes were hard. The jaw was set. I looked like a shark in a waiter's vest. I slipped into the house through the service entrance again, but this time I wasn't a beggar. I was part of the elite catering team Hartman had arranged. I carried a silver tray of champagne flutes, my hands steady, my heart beating a war drum against my ribs. The house had been transformed. My house. The living room where I used to read bedtime stories to my wife was now a stage for Pamela's vanity. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto a crowd of Boston's elite. Women in gowns that cost more than a teacher's salary. Men in tuxedos discussing tax shelters while sipping vintage Krug. And the banner. It hung above the fireplace, massive and insulting. The Pamela Foundation. Charity gala for underprivileged children. The irony tasted like bile. She was raising money for poor children while enslaving her own niece. I moved through the crowd, a ghost in a white jacket. No one looked at me. Servants are invisible to people like this. They see the tray, not the man holding it. This was my armor. Then I saw her, Lily. She wasn't wearing the maid's uniform from yesterday. It was worse. Pamela had dressed her in a gray sackcloth dress, shapeless and rough, like something out of a Dickensian nightmare. Her hair was pulled back severely, exposing her tired face. She walked through the crowd with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, her eyes fixed on the floor. I watched a woman in a red silk dress snap her fingers at my daughter. Girl, bring that here. Lily hurried over, bowing her head. The woman took a crab cake and didn't even say thank you. She turned her back, dismissing Lily as if she were a piece of furniture. I gripped my tray until the metal bit into my palms. I wanted to drop it. I wanted to grab that woman by her pearl necklace and tell her exactly who she was disrespecting. But I forced myself to breathe. Not yet. I circled the room, moving closer to the epicenter of the poison. Pamela. She held court near the grand piano, a glass of champagne in one hand, her other hand resting theatrically on her chest. She was telling a story. Her favorite story. It is a burden, of course. She said, her voice projecting perfectly to her audience. But what could I do? Her father was a criminal, a swindler who stole millions and fled the country, leaving his daughter with nothing but debts and bad habits. The guests murmured sympathetically. You are a saint, Pamela, a man with a monocle said, taking in the daughter of a fugitive. Most people would have turned her away. I couldn't do that. Pamela sighed, looking tragically noble. Family is family even when they are rotten. Lily. Poor thing. She is just like him. Lazy. Entitled. She thinks the world owes her a living. I have to be strict with her. I make her work to teach her the value of $1, to help her atone for her father's sins. Atone. She was talking about atonement while living in my house, drinking my wine and wearing diamonds bought with money she stole from my daughter. I stepped forward, offering refills. I was close enough to smell her perfume. It was cloying and sweet, masking the rot of her soul. She didn't even glance at me as she took a fresh glass. "And the father?" a woman asked. "Is he really dead?" "We can only hope." Pamela laughed lightly. "If he were alive, he would be in prison. But honestly, he probably died in a gutter somewhere. It is a fitting end for a man who abandoned his family." I stood 3 feet away from her. I could have reached out and snapped her neck before anyone realized what was happening. The urge was electric. It hummed in my muscles. But death was too easy. Death was an escape. I wanted her to live. I wanted her to live in a cage knowing I was the one who put her there. I moved away, fading back into the crowd. I needed to find Brandon. He was by the bar, of course. He was already drunk, his face flushed, his tie loosened. He was leaning against the mahogany counter, holding court with a group of younger men, loud and obnoxious. My cousin. He was saying, gesturing with his glass toward Lily, who was clearing empty plates on the other side of the room. "Look at her. Pathetic, right? Mom keeps her around out of pity. Personally, I would have kicked her out years ago. She brings down the property value." The men laughed. "She is kind of cute, though." One of them leered. In a tragic way, Brandon snorted. "Do not waste your time. She is broken goods. Besides, she knows her place. She knows who holds the leash." He pushed off the bar, stumbling slightly. "Watch this." He walked toward Lily. I followed, keeping pace, moving through the shadows. The predator instinct in me woke up fully. I knew what was coming. Lily was struggling with a heavy tray of dirty glasses. She looked exhausted, her arms trembling under the weight. Brandon stepped into her path. He didn't move aside. He stood there, a smirk on his face, waiting. Lily tried to step around him. "Excuse me, Brandon," she whispered. He moved to block her. "It is Mr. Vance to you," he said loudly. "Are you drunk, Lily? You are swaying. I am just tired. Please let me pass." "Tired?" Brandon laughed. "You don't know what tired is. You have never worked a real day in your life. You are just a leech mooching off my mother's charity." He reached out and poked her shoulder. Hard. The tray wobbled. A glass slid to the edge. "Careful," he shouted. He slapped the bottom of the tray. It was a quick, vicious movement masked as a stumble. The tray tipped. A dozen crystal glasses crashed to the floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the crowded room. Music stopped. Conversations died. Everyone turned to look. Red wine and shards of glass covered the white marble. Brandon jumped back, feigning outrage. "Look what you did!" he screamed. "You clumsy idiot! That is Italian crystal!" Lily dropped to her knees. "I am sorry. I am so sorry." It slipped. "I will clean it up." She began picking up the jagged pieces of glass with her bare hands. She was shaking so hard she cut herself immediately. Blood welled up on her finger, mixing with the wine. "You are damn right you will clean it up," Brandon yelled. "But not before you apologize to my guests for ruining the mood." He reached down and grabbed her by the hair, yanking her head back. "Look at them, apologize." My vision went red. The world narrowed to a tunnel. At the end of that tunnel was Brandon's hand in my daughter's hair. I took a step forward. My hand went to the steak knife on a nearby table. I was going to kill him. I was going to drive that blade into his throat right here in front of everyone. Consequences be damned. But then I saw Lily's eyes. She wasn't looking at Brandon. She was looking past him. She was looking at the guests, pleading, begging for someone, anyone, to help her. I looked at the crowd. Hundreds of people. The city's elite, judges, doctors, philanthropists, people who claimed to care about the poor. Not one of them moved. They watched. Some looked away uncomfortable. Others watched with morbid curiosity, sipping their drinks. But nobody stepped in. Nobody said a word. They were complicit. Their silence was a stamp of approval on Pamela's narrative. To them, Lily wasn't a victim. She was a bad servant who deserved correction. That silence hurt more than the slap that followed. Brandon raised his hand. The sound of his palm striking her cheek echoed through the silent room. It was a wet, meaty sound. Lily fell back onto the glass. She cried out a sharp sound of pain. Pamela appeared from the crowd. She didn't rush to help her niece. She rushed to her son. "Brandon, darling, are you hurt? Did she cut you?" "She spilled wine on my shoes, Mom." Brandon whined, pointing at a microscopic spot on his leather loafers. Pamela turned on Lily. Her face was a mask of cold fury. "You useless girl! Get up! Get out of my sight! You have ruined my evening!" Lily scrambled to her feet. She was bleeding from her hand, and her cheek was already swelling. She held her arm close to her body, running toward the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. Pamela turned to the guests, clapping her hands and forcing a smile. "I am so sorry, everyone. It is so hard to find good help these days, especially when you are doing it as a favor. Please enjoy the dessert." The music started again. The conversation resumed. The incident was forgotten, a minor disruption in their night of self-congratulation. I stood there, my hand still hovering over the knife. My heart was pounding, a slow, heavy rhythm. "Kill him," a voice in my head screamed. "Kill them all." I took a breath. I let it out slowly. If I acted now, I would be the violent criminal they claimed I was. I would be arrested. And Lily would still be bound by the lies, by the fake debt, by the fear for her son. Brandon would heal. Pamela would play the victim, and nothing would change. I needed to cut the head off the snake. I needed the signature. I needed Pamela to sign the contract selling the house. I needed her to commit the ultimate fraud. I needed her to sell something she didn't own so I could crush her with the full weight of the law. I turned away from the spot where my daughter had bled. I walked to the kitchen. Lily was at the sink washing the blood off her hands. She was sobbing quietly, her shoulders shaking. I walked up to her. I didn't touch her. I couldn't risk being seen comforting her. I took a clean napkin from a stack. I placed it on the counter next to her. She looked up, her eyes were swollen. She didn't recognize me in the uniform without the beard. She just saw a waiter. "Thank you," she whispered. I leaned in close, pretending to stack plates. "Endure," I whispered. "Just for tonight." She froze, looking at me. She sensed something, a familiarity in the voice. "Tomorrow," I said. "The sun rises." I turned and walked out the back door before she could ask questions, before I could break down and hug her. I stood in the alleyway, ripping the bow tie from my neck. I punched the brick wall. The pain in my knuckles felt good. It was grounding. I pulled out my phone. My hand was shaking with adrenaline. "Hartman," I said when he answered. "Did you see it?" he asked. He had been monitoring the cameras we planted. "I saw it." She signed the waiver, Conrad. Hartman said, his voice urgent, while she was in the kitchen. Brandon made her sign the document relinquishing her claim to the estate. He told her if she didn't sign, he would go to the hospital tonight and pull the plug on the boy's machine. I closed my eyes. They had forced her hand. They had the waiver. They thought they were clear. "Good," I said. My voice sounded dead even to my own ears. That was the last piece. "The shell company is ready," Hartman said. "The offer is on the table. 8 million cash, closing in 24 hours. "Send it," I said. Send it now. Let them wake up to a pot of gold. Let them think they have won. Are you sure, Conrad? You saw what they did. I am sure, I said, looking up at the lit windows of the mansion. They slapped my daughter. They made her bleed. Tomorrow I am going to make them homeless. Tomorrow I am going to make them inmates. Send the offer, Hartman, and tell the FBI to be ready. The transaction happens at noon. I walked away from the house into the dark, wet night. The image of Lily on the floor surrounded by broken glass burned in my mind. It would fuel me. It would keep me sharp. Brandon thought he was powerful because he could hit a woman. Pamela thought she was safe because she had money and connections. They didn't know that the waiter who handed them champagne was the man who owned the ground they stood on. And tomorrow I was going to pull the earth out from under their feet. I'm coming for you, I whispered to the rain, and hell is coming with me. The morning sun hit the windows of the Beacon Hill mansion, but it did not cleanse the rot inside. From my hotel suite, I watched the monitors. The house was a wreck. The aftermath of the gala lay scattered across the floors like the bones of a feast. Broken glass, stained napkins, and the lingering smell of stale ambition. Pamela sat at the kitchen island, nursing a coffee and a migraine. Brandon was sprawled on the sofa in the living room, still wearing his tuxedo trousers from the night before, shirtless, and sweating out the expensive scotch he had stolen from my cellar. They looked miserable. They looked broke. I picked up the phone. Do it, Hartman, I said. The bait was in the water. 10 minutes later, a bike messenger arrived at the front door. I watched on the camera as Lily answered. Her face was bruised. A purple and yellow mark bloomed on her cheekbone where Brandon had struck her. She moved stiffly, her ribs likely bruised from being shoved. She took the thick envelope and limped toward the kitchen. "Ma-am," Lily said, her voice a whisper. "A courier brought this. It is marked urgent." Pamela snatched the envelope from her hand. "Get me more coffee," she snapped. "And do not bleed on the counter." Lily retreated. I felt a muscle in my jaw jump. Patience, Conrad. The trap is set. Pamela tore open the envelope. It was heavy cream-colored paper. The letterhead read, Obsidian Capital Partners, a shell company I had incorporated in the Cayman Islands 12 hours ago. I watched her eyes scan the document. I saw the exact moment the numbers registered. Her eyes widened. Her mouth fell open. She dropped her coffee mug. It shattered on the floor, but she didn't even flinch. "Brandon!" She screamed. "Brandon, get in here!" Brandon stumbled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "What? What is it? Is it the cops? Did the old man come back?" "Look at this." Pamela shoved the paper into his chest. "Look at the number, Brandon." He squinted, reading. Then he froze. $8 million, he whispered. $8 million. Cash. I leaned back in my chair. Greed is a powerful drug. It overrides caution. It overrides logic. It overrides humanity. The house was worth $4.5 million at best. An offer of $8 million was suspicious. It was too good to be true. But to people drowning in debt, to people who believe they deserve the world, it wasn't suspicious. It was destiny. Who are they? Brandon asked, his voice trembling with excitement. "Some investment firm," Pamela said, reading frantically. "They represent a foreign buyer, someone who wants privacy. They want the property for a portfolio. Read the conditions, Mom." Pamela flipped the page. Cash offer? No inspection required. As is condition, closing in 48 hours. 48 hours, Brandon shouted. "We could be out of here by Friday. We could be rich. I could pay off the loan sharks. I could buy a Ferrari. Mom, we have to sign. We have to sign right now." I watched them dance around the kitchen. They hugged, they laughed, they stepped over the shattered coffee mug and the spilled liquid, completely ignoring the mess. They were celebrating a victory that was actually their execution warrant. "Call the number," Brandon urged. "Call them now before they change their minds." Pamela dialed the number printed on the letterhead. It rang on a burner phone sitting on the desk next to me in the hotel room, but Hartman answered it from his office downtown. Obsidian Capital. Hartman's voice was smooth, professional, and utterly indifferent. "Yes, hello." Pamela's voice was high-pitched, breathless. "This is Pamela Vance. I am the owner of the property on Beacon Hill. I received your offer." "Ah, yes, Mrs. Vance," Hartman said. "My client is very eager. He is a man who knows what he wants. He loves the historic architecture. He is willing to pay a premium for a quick transaction." "We accept," Pamela blurted out. "We accept the offer. When can we get the check?" Hartman paused. The silence stretched out, making them sweat. "Excellent. However, Mrs. Vance, our due diligence team has flagged a minor issue with the title." I saw Pamela stiffen. "What issue?" "The title is in my name." "Indeed. But the chain of title from the previous owner, your brother-in-law, it was a transfer based on a presumption of death. My client is very particular about clean titles. He does not want any future claimants popping up. He requires a quitclaim deed, a waiver of all rights and inheritance signed by the direct heir." "The heir," Pamela whispered. "The daughter," Hartman said. "Lily Vance, we need her signature on a document stating she renounces any and all claims to the property and the estate. Once we have that signature notarized along with yours, we can wire the funds. Without it, well, my client will move on to the next property on his list. You have 24 hours. He hung up. I watched the color drain from Pamela's face. She looked at Brandon. "They need Lily to sign," she said. "They need her to waive her inheritance." Brandon laughed, but it was a nervous, jagged sound. "So, make her sign. She does whatever we tell her. She is a slave mom. She will sign. She knows this house was her father's," Pamela said, pacing the kitchen. "She thinks we saved it, but if she sees an $8 million sale, if she realizes what she is signing away, she won't realize anything." Brandon grabbed a steak knife from the block. He tested the edge with his thumb. "We don't ask her mom. We tell her. And if she says no, we use the leverage." I knew what that meant. I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. "Get her," Pamela ordered. Brandon stormed out of the kitchen. I switched camera views. I watched him march up the stairs to the small attic room where Lily slept. He kicked the door open. Lily was sitting on her narrow cot, holding an ice pack to her cheek. She jumped up when he entered. "Downstairs," Brandon barked. "Now." She followed him, terrified. They marched her into the library. Pamela was sitting behind my mahogany desk, the contract spread out in front of her. She looked like a judge presiding over a kangaroo court. "Sit down, Lily," Pamela said, pointing to a hard wooden chair. Lily sat, her hands twisting in her lap. "We have good news," Pamela said, putting on a fake smile that looked more like a rictus of pain. "We have found a way to solve all our problems. A way to finally pay off the massive debts your father left us. We are selling the house." "Selling the house," Lily whispered. "But where will we go?" "We will buy something smaller. Something manageable." Pamela waved her hand dismissively. "But to do this, we need you to help us. The buyers are very strict about paperwork. Since you are Conrad's daughter, they need you to sign a form just saying you don't object to the sale. It is a formality." She slid the waiver across the desk. Beside it, she placed a pen. Sign here, honey. Lily looked at the paper. She picked it up. She read it slowly, her lips moving. This says I give up everything, she said, her voice gaining a tiny fraction of strength. It says I waive my right to the estate, to the trust, to everything. It is just legal jargon, Brandon said, stepping up behind her. Just sign it. Lily looked up at him. She looked at the bruise on her arm where he had grabbed her yesterday. She looked at Pamela. No, she said softly. What did you say? Pamela asked, her voice dropping an octave. No, Lily said. My father. He told me this house was for me. Before he left, he said it was my castle. I remember. You told me he was a criminal, but this house is the only thing I have left of him. If you sell it, sign the paper, you stupid girl. Pamela slammed her hand on the desk. Do you have any idea how much this costs us to keep you? The food, the clothes, the medicine for your brat. You owe us this. I will work harder, Lily pleaded. I will take extra shifts. But please don't sell the house. It is my home. It is Leo's home. Brandon laughed. It was a cruel, ugly sound. Leo, he said. That is right. Leo. He pulled out his phone. He dialed a number and put it on speaker. Mercy Hospital Billing Department. How may I direct your call? The automated voice chirped. Brandon looked at Lily. His eyes were dead. I am calling the administration, Lily. I am going to tell them to cancel the insurance. I am going to tell them we are stopping payments on the ventilator maintenance. I am going to tell them to pull the plug. No, Lily screamed. She lunged for the phone, but Brandon shoved her back into the chair. Sit down, he roared. Or I swear to God I will do it. I will let that boy suffocate. Do you know what it looks like when a heart fails, Lily? Do you know what it sounds like when lungs fill with fluid? Please, Lily sobbed. Please don't hurt him. He is innocent. He is expensive, Brandon said. And I am done paying for him unless you make it worth my while. He tapped the paper on the desk with the knife. Sign the paper. And the boy lives. Sign the paper and we keep paying the doctors. Refuse, and you can plan a funeral for a child. I watched from the hotel room. I was standing now, my fists clenched so tight my fingernails cut into my palms. This was the moment. This was the depth of their depravity. They were holding a gun to a child's head to get a payday. I wanted to burst through the door. I wanted to end it. But I couldn't. Not yet. The waiver needed to be signed. It was the trap. If she signed it under duress, it proved extortion. It proved coercion. It proved they were willing to kill for this money. But more importantly, once Pamela countersigned it and presented it to the buyer, she committed fraud on a massive scale. She would be selling something she knew she had stolen, using a signature she had extorted. It was the final nail in her coffin. Sign it, Lily. I whispered to the screen. Sign it and save your son. I will save you both. Lily was shaking violently. She looked at the phone in Brandon's hand. She looked at Pamela's cold, expectant face. You promise, she whispered. You promise you won't stop his medicine. I promise, Pamela said. Just sign the damn paper. Lily picked up the pen. Her hand trembled so much she could barely hold it. She touched the tip to the paper. Tears fell from her eyes, blotting the ink. I am sorry, Daddy, she whispered. I am so sorry. She signed. She scratched her name across the line, signing away her birthright, signing away her home, signing away her dignity to save her son. Done. Brandon snatched the paper away. See? That wasn't so hard. Get out of my sight, Pamela hissed. Go to the cellar. The cellar? Lily asked. We have buyers coming tomorrow, Pamela said. I don't want them seeing you. You look like a wreck. Go to the wine cellar and stay there. I will lock the door. You can come out when the money is in the bank, but… Leo, I need to go to the hospital. You will go nowhere. Brandon grabbed her arm. You stay in the cellar. If you make a sound, if you bang on the door, remember the phone call. They dragged her out of the library. I watched on the hallway cameras as they shoved her down the narrow stairs to the basement. I heard the heavy click of the deadbolt sliding home. Pamela and Brandon returned to the kitchen. They poured champagne. We did it, Brandon said, raising his glass. We are rich. Pamela took the signed waiver and kissed it. $8 million, she purred. And the best part is we finally get rid of the girl. Once the house is sold, we put her on a bus to nowhere. Let her figure out how to pay for the kid then. They clinked glasses. I turned off the monitor. The silence in the hotel room was heavy. They thought they had won. They thought they had secured their future. They had just signed their confessions. I picked up my coat. I picked up the cane. Hartman, I said into the phone. The document is signed. They locked her in the cellar. Shall I call the police? Hartman asked. No, I said. Tonight I am going to the house. I am going to see my daughter. And tomorrow we close the deal. I walked to the elevator. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, mechanical precision. They wanted to sell the house. Fine. I would buy it. And the price would be their lives. I checked my watch. Midnight. The perfect time for a ghost to visit. I slipped the lock-picking set into my pocket. The cellar door was old wood. It wouldn't hold me. Hang on, Lily, I thought as I stepped out into the night. Daddy is coming home. And this time I am not knocking. The night air was biting as I circled the perimeter of the mansion on Beacon Hill. The windows above were dark, save for the faint, drunken glow from the living room where Brandon was likely celebrating his premature victory. But my business was not with the lights above. It was with the darkness below. I knew this house better than the architects who designed it. I knew that behind the overgrown ivy on the north wall, there was an old coal chute, a remnant of the 19th century, that I had preserved for historical accuracy during the renovations 15 years ago. It led directly to the sub-basement adjacent to the wine cellar. Pamela and Brandon were lazy. They would have locked the main door, but they would never have thought to weld shut a chute that hadn't been used in 50 years. I slid the iron grate aside. It moved silently, thanks to the oil I had applied 2 nights ago during my initial reconnaissance. I lowered myself into the black throat of the house. The slide was steep and rough, tearing at my beggar's coat, but I felt nothing. My mind was focused entirely on the woman trapped in the dark. I landed on a pile of old coal dust. The air down here was stagnant, heavy with the smell of damp earth and vintage cork. I clicked on a small penlight, shielding the beam with my hand. I moved toward the heavy oak door of the wine cellar. It was locked from the outside with a simple sliding bolt. I didn't open it immediately. I pressed my ear to the wood. I heard nothing. No crying, no movement. A cold spike of terror drove itself into my chest. Had they gone too far? Had the stress, the hunger, the physical abuse finally broken her body? I slid the bolt back. It gave a heavy metallic thud. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The wine cellar was a cavern of brick and shadows. Rows of dust-covered bottles lined the walls, my collection worth thousands gathering dust, while my daughter starved. In the far corner, huddled on a pile of old burlap sacks, was a small, trembling shape. Lily. She didn't move when the light hit her. She was curled into a fetal ball, her knees pulled to her chest, her arms wrapping her head as if to shield herself from a blow. She was shivering violently. Lily, I whispered. She flinched. It was a sharp, full-body spasm of terror. She scrambled backward, pushing herself into the cold brick corner, her eyes wide and unseeing in the gloom. No, she whimpered. No more. Please, Brandon. I signed it. I signed the paper. Don't hurt me. It is not Brandon, I said, keeping my voice low and gentle. It is me, the man from the porch. She blinked her eyes, adjusting to the penlight. Recognition dawned on her face, but it was not followed by relief. It was followed by a wave of pure, distilled hatred. You, she hissed. She tried to stand, but her legs were too weak. She slumped back against the wall, glaring at me with a ferocity that broke my heart. Get away from me, she spat. Get out. Have you not done enough? I took a step closer, reaching into my coat pocket. I had brought a thermos of hot soup and a bottle of water. I brought you food, I said. I don't want your food. She screamed, though her voice was a raspy croak. I don't want anything from you. You are the reason I am here. You are the reason my son is dying. I stopped. The pain of her words was worse than any torture I had endured in the African prisons. Pamela had done her work well. She had turned the victim against her only savior. They told me everything. Lily sobbed, tears cutting tracks through the grime on her face. They told me how you stole the money, how you ran away and left us to rot. Pamela saved us. She took us in when you abandoned us. And now because of you, because of your debts, I have to sell the only home I have. I have to sign away my life to save Leo. She picked up a loose brick from the floor, holding it like a weapon. Her hands shook, but her intent was clear. Go away, she yelled. If they find you here, they will hurt Leo. They told me if I talk to anyone, they will pull the plug. Get out, you are a curse. Every time you appear, my life gets worse. I looked at my daughter. She was broken, starved, and terrified. She was defending her abusers because she believed they were her saviors. It was a sickness, a twisting of reality that only years of psychological torture could produce. I could have told her then. I could have told her I was a billionaire. I could have told her about the trust fund, the fraud, the lies. But she wouldn't have believed me. Not yet. Her mind was too fragile, too entrenched in the narrative of her suffering. If I tried to break her reality now, she might shatter completely. Or worse, she might scream loud enough to wake Brandon, ruining the trap I had set for tomorrow. I needed her to trust, not my words, but my conviction. I set the thermos and the water on the floor. I knelt down, ignoring the brick she brandished. I looked her directly in the eyes, letting the penlight illuminate my face. I let her see the scars, the lines of age, the steel that lay beneath the beggar's disguise. Lily, I said. My voice was not pleading. It was a command forged in the fires of survival. Look at me. She hesitated. The brick wavered. She looked into my eyes. I am not who they say I am, I said. But that does not matter right now. What matters is tomorrow. Tomorrow, she whispered. Tomorrow they are going to bring you upstairs. They are going to take you to a room with lawyers. They are going to put a document in front of you. The final sale. The end of this house. Tears spilled from her eyes again. I have to sign it, she choked out. If I don't... Leo... I know, I said. I know what they threatened, and I know you are afraid. You think that by signing that paper you are losing everything. You think you are giving up. I reached out and gently took the brick from her hand. She didn't resist. Her fight was draining away, leaving only exhaustion. I took her cold, rough hands in mine. Listen to me, Lily. Tomorrow, when they put that paper in front of you, you sign it. She stared at me, confused. What, you sign it? I repeated, my grip tightening. You write your name big and bold. You do not hesitate. You do not cry. You look Pamela in the eye, and you sign that house away. But it is my home. It is all I have. It is a cage, I said fiercely. This house is not your home, Lily. It is the altar where they have sacrificed you for 15 years. You need to let it burn. I leaned closer, my eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her stop breathing. I promise you, I swore, on my life, on your mother's memory, on Leo's breath. If you sign that paper tomorrow, the hell stops. The moment the ink is dry, their power over you vanishes. Why? She asked, her voice trembling. Why would you say that? Who are you? I am the man who is going to end them, I said. I stood up. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Not trust, not yet, but curiosity, confusion, and perhaps a tiny spark of hope that she hadn't felt in a decade. Eat the soup, I said. Drink the water. You need your strength for tomorrow. You need to be steady when you hold the pen. I turned to the door. Wait, she whispered. I stopped. Will you be there? She asked. I will be there, I promised. You won't see me until it is time, but I will be there. I walked out of the cellar and bolted the door behind me, locking her back in the dark. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, leaving my child in a dungeon. But it was necessary. The butterfly has to struggle to escape the chrysalis, or its wings will never be strong enough to fly. I climbed back up the chute, emerging into the cold night air. I was covered in coal dust again, but I felt clean. The plan was in motion. Lily would sign, Pamela would sell, and the moment that transaction was recorded, the trap would snap shut. I walked back to the hotel. I did not sleep. I sat by the window watching the sun rise over the city. I watched the light hit the hospital where my grandson lay sleeping, unaware that his grandfather was sharpening the blade that would cut his bonds. At 9:00 a.m. I showered. I shaved the stubble from my chin. I put on the suit I had bought in London, a bespoke navy wool that cost $10,000. I put on the Patek Philippe watch that I had hidden in the sole of my boot for 15 years. I clipped the platinum cufflinks onto my shirt. The beggar was dead. Conrad the tycoon had returned. I looked at myself in the mirror. Showtime. I picked up the briefcase containing the documents that would obliterate Pamela's life. I walked out of the hotel suite. Hartman was waiting in the lobby, flanked by 2 federal agents and the chief of police, a man who owed me a favor from 20 years ago. Is everything ready? Hartman asked. The money is in escrow, I said. The trap is baited. Let's go buy a house. We got into the fleet of black SUVs. We drove toward Beacon Hill. I watched the streets pass by, feeling the anticipation coil in my gut like a viper. Pamela was expecting a sheep she could shear. She was expecting a nameless investor she could trick. She was about to open the door to the wolf. The conference room on the 45th floor of the Prudential Tower was a temple dedicated to avarice. From the floor-to-ceiling windows, one could see the entire city of Boston spread out like a map of conquests. The table was a slab of polished black granite, long enough to land a plane on, and sitting around it were 3 vultures waiting for a carcass. I watched them from the security feed on my phone, standing just outside the double mahogany doors. Pamela was vibrating with nervous energy, checking her reflection in a compact mirror, applying another layer of red lipstick to a mouth that had spoken nothing but lies for 15 years. She wore a Chanel suit that I knew she had charged to a credit card opened in my name. Brandon sat next to her, spinning a Mont Blanc pen between his fingers. He looked hungover, his eyes bloodshot, but bright with greed. He kept checking his watch, tapping his foot, a restless rhythm of impatience. He was already spending the money in his head, buying cars, buying women, buying his way out of the hole he had dug for himself. And Clive, the lawyer who had sold his soul. He sat at the head of the table, reviewing the fraudulent documents one last time. He looked smug. He thought he had pulled off the perfect crime. He thought he was minutes away from a commission that would pay for his summer house in the Hamptons. "Bring her in." Pamela's voice came through my earbuds, sharp and impatient. I watched as the side door opened. A paralegal led Lily into the room. My daughter looked like a prisoner walking to the gallows. She was still wearing the same gray rags from the night before, though someone had tried to clean the blood from her cheek. It hadn't worked. The bruise was blooming dark and angry against her pale skin. She walked with a limp, her head bowed, her spirit crushed. She didn't look at the view. She didn't look at the expensive furniture. She looked at the floor, terrified to make eye contact with the people who held her leash. "Sit." Brandon barked, pointing to a chair set slightly apart from the table like the accused in a tribunal. Lily sat. She folded her hands in her lap. Her knuckles were white. "Here is the pen," Clive said, sliding a document across the granite. "You know what this is, Lily. We discussed it. This is the quitclaim deed and the waiver of inheritance. By signing this, you acknowledge that you have no claim to the property on Beacon Hill or any assets associated with the estate of Conrad Vance. You are signing this voluntarily and without duress." He said the words, quickly rushing through the legal formalities like a priest trying to finish a funeral before it rained. Lily looked at the paper. Her hands were shaking so bad I thought she might drop the pen. "Is Leo okay?" she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "He is fine," Brandon said, leaning forward. "I called the hospital this morning. They are waiting for the payment. You sign, we pay. You don't sign, well, you know the drill. It was a lie. A beautiful, terrible lie. Leo was fine because I had guards posted at his door, and the hospital administration was currently being interviewed by federal agents. But Lily didn't know that. She believed the monster in front of her held the keys to life and death. "Just sign it, you stupid girl," Pamela hissed. "Do not waste our time. The buyers will be here any minute. We need this done before they walk through that door." Lily picked up the pen. I saw a tear fall from her eye. It hit the granite table with a silent splash. "I am sorry, Dad," she whispered again, just like she had in the library. She wasn't speaking to me, the man outside the door. She was speaking to the memory of the father she thought had abandoned her. She was apologizing for giving up his legacy. She pressed the pen to the paper. She signed. The scratch of the nib against the parchment sounded like a scream in the silence of the room. She signed her name, surrendering her birthright, surrendering her home, surrendering everything because she was a mother who loved her son more than she loved herself. "Done." Clive snatched the paper away before the ink was even dry. He inspected it, nodding with satisfaction. He stamped it with his notary seal. Thump! The sound of a cage locking. Pamela let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for a decade. She leaned back in her chair, a look of pure, unadulterated triumph on her face. "Finally," she said, looking at Lily with a sneer that twisted her beautiful features into something grotesque. "Finally, you are useful for something." Lily shrank back into her chair, trying to make herself small, trying to disappear. "You can go now." Brandon waved a hand at her. "Go wait in the reception. Or better yet, go wait in the service elevator. We don't want the buyers seeing you. You look like trash." "No." Pamela stopped him. "Let her stay. I want her to see this. I want her to see the check. I want her to know exactly how much she is worth. Nothing. She is worth absolutely nothing. This money is ours. It is payment for putting up with her whining for 15 years. Lily didn't move. She just stared at her hands, accepting the abuse as if it were weather. Where are they? Brandon asked, looking at the door. It is noon, they said noon. Clive checked his watch. Obsidian Capital is very punctual. They will be here. Relax, the money is already in escrow. We just need to exchange the signatures. I put my phone in my pocket. I adjusted my cufflinks. I smoothed the lapel of my navy suit. It was time. I nodded to the two large men standing behind me. My personal security detail, former special forces. They opened the double doors. I walked in. I did not walk in like a beggar. I did not walk in like a ghost. I walked in like a man who owned the building, the city, and the oxygen they were breathing. My Italian leather shoes made a sharp, authoritative click on the marble floor. The three of them looked up. At first, there was just confusion. They were expecting a team of lawyers. They were expecting suits they didn't know. Instead, they saw an old man. But then they looked closer. Pamela's eyes narrowed. She tilted her head. She saw the face she had mocked on her porch 2 days ago. She saw the eyes of the man she had thrown $200 at. But the brain is a funny thing. It rejects just what it cannot understand. She saw Conrad, but Conrad was a beggar. Conrad was a bum in a dirty coat. This man was wearing a suit that cost more than her car. This man radiated a cold, terrifying power. Conrad, she whispered. The name hung in the air, sucking the oxygen out of the room. Brandon stood up so fast, his chair tipped over. What the hell? He shouted. How did you get in here? Security. Clive looked pale. He looked from me to the door, expecting the real buyers to walk in behind me. I walked to the end of the table opposite them. I didn't say a word. I placed my leather briefcase on the granite. I opened it with a snap. Pamela stood up. Her face went through a spasm of emotions. Shock. Fear. And then finally it settled on anger. A defensive, arrogant anger. You! She laughed, but it sounded hysterical. You stole a suit. She pointed a shaking finger at me. Look at him, Brandon. He robbed a dry cleaner. Or maybe he mugged someone. She looked at Clive, seeking validation. Call the police, Clive. The beggar followed us. He is trespassing. I ignored her. I looked at Lily. She was staring at me. Her mouth was slightly open. She looked at my face, clean-shaven and sharp. She looked at my clothes, and then she looked at my eyes. The eyes were the same. The eyes of the man in the cellar. The eyes of the man who brought her soup. She started to rise from her chair, but her legs gave out. She slumped back, clutching the armrests. Daddy? She breathed. The word was soft, but it hit the room like a grenade. Pamela slammed her hand on the table. Shut up, Lily. He is not your father. He is a con artist. He is a homeless bum who thinks he can crash my meeting. She turned to me, her eyes blazing with a madness born of desperation. Who do you think you are? You think because you put on a stolen suit, you are someone. You are nothing. You are dirt. I gave you money to leave. I should have had you arrested. She walked around the table, marching toward me. Get out, she screamed. Get out before the buyers arrive. You are going to ruin the deal. You are going to ruin everything. I let her get close. I let her get within arm's reach. She raised her hand, as if to slap me just as her son had slapped my daughter. I caught her wrist. I didn't squeeze. I didn't twist. I just held it. My grip was iron. She gasped, trying to pull away, but she couldn't move. She looked into my face, and for the first time the delusion cracked. She saw the truth. She saw that the man holding her was not a beggar. I am the buyer, I said. My voice was low, calm, and resonant. It carried to every corner of the room. Pamela froze. What? I released her wrist with a shove. She stumbled back, catching herself on the table. I said, I am the buyer. I am Obsidian Capital. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. I threw them onto the table. They slid across the granite, stopping perfectly in front of Clive. Brandon laughed. It was a wet, nervous sound. You are crazy, old man. You have $200 to your name. Mom gave it to you. You are hallucinating. Clive picked up the documents. His hands were shaking. He began to read. As he read, his face turned the color of ash. He slumped in his chair, his cigar falling from his mouth onto the expensive carpet. Clive, Pamela demanded. Tell him to leave. He is the buyer, Pam, Clive whispered. His voice was a croak. What are you saying? Look at the signature. Clive held up the paper. It is a proof of funds. Certified bank draft. $8 million. He looked at me with eyes full of terror. The account. It is in the name of Conrad Vance. Pamela snatched the paper. She stared at it. She stared at the numbers. She stared at the bank seal. A Swiss bank. A bank she couldn't touch. No, she whispered. This is fake. You forged this. You don't have money. You were in prison. You lost everything. I didn't lose anything, Pamela, I said, walking slowly toward her. I hid it. I buried it deep where parasites like you couldn't find it. I stopped in front of Lily. I reached out and gently touched her shoulder. She flinched, then looked up at me. I told you I would be here, I said softly. Then I turned back to the vultures. I was in Angola, Pamela. That part is true. But I wasn't in prison for stealing. I was in prison because I refused to let a corrupt government steal my mines. I fought them for 15 years, and while I fought, my assets grew. My investments compounded. I leaned over the table, placing my hands on the granite. I didn't come back a beggar. I came back a billionaire. The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. You could hear Brandon's ragged breathing. You have money, Brandon stammered. I have enough money to buy this building, I said. I have enough money to buy this city block. And I certainly have enough money to buy the house you stole from me. But Pamela's mind was racing, trying to find an angle, trying to find a way to win. But you made the offer. You offered $8 million. If you are the buyer, then you have to pay us. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. Pay you. I picked up the quitclaim deed, the document Lily had just signed. I held it up. This is what I needed. This signature. This proof that you forced the rightful heir to sign away her property under duress. I ripped the document in half. Then in half again. I let the pieces flutter to the floor like confetti. I am not buying the house, Pamela. I already own it. That is a lie, Clive shouted, standing up. The deed is in Pamela's name. It was transferred legally. Legally, I laughed. You call forging a death certificate legal, Clive. You call forging my signature on a power of attorney legal. Clive went still. How do you know that? Because you told me. Yesterday, in your office, while you were smoking that cigar and laughing at the beggar. I pulled the burner phone from my pocket. I pressed play. Clive's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. I forged the death certificate myself, remember, and the transfer of the deed. Your signature on the power of attorney looked better than his real one. Clive dropped back into his chair. He looked like he was having a heart attack. And you, Pamela, I continued. You signed for the hospital bills. You intercepted the trust fund statements. You created a fake debt to enslave my daughter. I turned to Brandon. And you? You threatened to kill a child. You threatened to pull the plug on my grandson. Brandon backed away until he hit the wall. He looked like a trapped rat. I didn't mean it, he squeaked. It was just negotiation. Negotiation, Ida repeated. I walked over to him. He was taller than me, younger than me, but he shrank as I approached. He saw the violence in my eyes. He saw the man who had survived a war zone. You made her lick the floor, Brandon. He didn't answer. He was trembling. You slapped her face in front of 100 people. I didn't hit him. Not yet. I just stood there letting my presence crush him. I am not here to buy a house, I said, turning back to the group. I am here to foreclose on your lives. I looked at the door. Come in, gentlemen. The doors opened again. This time it wasn't security. It was Hartman. And behind him were 4 men in windbreakers. The letters on their backs were yellow and bold. FBI. And behind them 2 uniformed officers from the Boston Police Department. Clive stood up, putting his hands up. Now wait a minute. We can discuss this. Attorney-client privilege. Sit down, Clive, Hartman said. He walked into the room like an executioner. There is no privilege for fraud. There is no privilege for conspiracy to commit murder. Murder, Pamela shrieked. We didn't kill anyone. You killed my wife, I said quietly. The room went silent. My wife died of a broken heart, thinking I was a criminal. You told her that. You poisoned her against me while I was locked away, unable to defend myself. And then you tried to kill my daughter. You tried to kill her spirit. You tried to work her to death. You tried to kill my grandson by holding his life hostage. That is murder, Pamela. It is a slow, painful murder, and you enjoyed every second of it. Officer, Hartman said, pointing at the table. That is the forged deed. That is the fraudulent waiver. And these, he pointed to the terrified trio, these are the parasites. The FBI agents moved in. They went for Clive first. They cuffed him and dragged him away, his protests dying in his throat. Then they went for Brandon. He tried to run. He tried to scramble toward the side door. One of my security guards stepped in his path. He didn't even use his hands. He just tripped him. Brandon face planted onto the marble. He screamed as the agents pinned him down and cuffed his hands behind his back. And finally, Pamela. She stood there, clutching her pearls, looking at me with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. You can't do this, she hissed. I am your family. I raised your daughter. You enslaved my daughter. I corrected her. You stole her youth. You stole her inheritance. And you tried to sell her home. I walked up to her. I leaned in close so only she could hear. Do you know what the worst part is, Pamela? She stared at me, her eyes wide. I would have given it to you. If you had been kind. If you had loved her. If you had welcomed me home. I would have given you millions. I would have taken care of you for the rest of your life. I stepped back. But you chose greed. You chose cruelty. So now you get nothing. Take her, I said to the officers. They grabbed her arms. She started to scream. She screamed that she was innocent. She screamed that I was the criminal. She screamed for help. But no one helped her. Just like no one helped Lily last night. They dragged them out, all of them. The room was suddenly quiet. I turned to Lily. She was still sitting in the chair, staring at the door where her tormentors had vanished. She looked like she was waking up from a long, terrible dream. She looked at me. She stood up slowly. Her legs were shaking, but she stood. "Is it true?" she whispered. I nodded. "It is true." She walked toward me. She reached out and touched my face. She touched the expensive fabric of my suit. "You are real," she said. "I am real," I said. "And I am home." She collapsed into my arms. She sobbed. A deep wrenching sound that came from the bottom of her soul. I held her. I held her tight, feeling her thin frame shaking against me. I smelled the cheap soap she used, the smell of the cellar on her clothes, but underneath that I smelled my daughter. "I have you," I whispered into her hair. "I have you. Nobody will ever hurt you again." I looked over her shoulder at the empty room, at the view of the city I had conquered. The war was over. The enemy was destroyed. But there was one thing left to do. I looked at Hartman. "Get the car," I said. "We have a boy to visit, and a hospital to buy." The silence in the conference room was absolute. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a tomb, just before the lid is sealed. Pamela stood frozen by the table, her face a mask of crumbling plaster. Brandon was pressed against the wall, his chest heaving. Clive looked like a man who was calculating the drop from the 45th floor window. I did not break the silence with a shout. I did not need to. I had the power now. I raised my hand. It was a small, simple gesture, a flick of the wrist. The double doors swung open again. Hartman stepped through. He did not look like a lawyer who negotiated plea deals. He looked like a shark that had smelled blood in the water 3 miles away. He wore a charcoal suit that was cut sharp enough to bleed. In his hand he carried a black file box, not a briefcase, but it was who walked in behind him that sucked the remaining air out of the room. The Suffolk County Sheriff, a man named Miller, with a jaw like granite and eyes that had seen every lie a criminal could tell, and flanking him 2 men in blue windbreakers with the yellow letters FBI stenciled on the chest. Clive made a small choking sound. He tried to stand up again, his lawyer instincts kicking in a desperate attempt to regain control. "Gentlemen," he stammered, his hands fluttering like dying birds. "This is a private meeting. We are in the middle of a delicate commercial transaction. If you do not have a warrant—" "Sit down," Clive Hartman said. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a judge's gavel. "We do not need a warrant to enter a room owned by my client. And we certainly do not need a warrant to witness a felony in progress." Client Pamela whispered. She looked at me. "But you are the buyer." "You said you were the buyer." I walked to the table. I picked up the thick stack of documents I had thrown there moments ago. The proof of funds, the shell company registration, the offer letter. I looked at them. Then I looked at Pamela. I lied. I said calmly. I tossed the papers into the air. They fluttered down onto the table, settling over the broken pieces of the waiver Lily had signed. "I am not here to buy this house, Pamela. Why would I buy something that already belongs to me? I am here to reclaim my property, and I am here to bury you." "Property," Pamela shrieked, her hysteria rising. "You do not own it. The deed is in my name." Clive transferred it. "It is legal public record." I looked at Hartman. He stepped forward, placing the black file box on the table. He opened it. He pulled out a single document bound in blue leather. It looked old. It looked important. Mrs. Vance, Hartman said, opening the document. "You and your attorney, Mr. Clive, made a fatal error in your greed. You assumed that Conrad Vance owned the property at 42 Beacon Hill personally. You assumed that by declaring him dead and forging a power of attorney, you could transfer the title to yourself." He slid the document across the granite. "But Conrad Vance never owned that house." Pamela looked at the paper. Her eyes darted across the lines of text, unable to comprehend. "What is this?" she hissed. This, Hartman said, is the charter for the Andromeda International Trust, established in Zurich 20 years ago. The trust owns the house. The trust owns the cars. The trust owns the art collection. And the trust has only one beneficiary. Hartman pointed a long finger at Lily, who was still standing by the door, trembling. Lily Vance. I watched Pamela's face. I saw the gears turning, the denial warring with the cold, hard reality. But, she stammered. But I have the deed. I have the paper. You have a forgery, Hartman said. You forged a transfer from Conrad Vance to Pamela Vance. But since Conrad Vance did not hold the title, the transfer is void. It is a nullity. You transferred nothing. You stole nothing. You have been living in a house you do not own, spending money you do not have, and terrorizing a woman who is the sole legal owner of the roof over your head. No, Brandon shouted from the wall. That is legal mumbo-jumbo. We have lived there for 15 years. Squatters' rights, adverse possession. Something. Hartman laughed. It was a dry, terrifying sound. Adverse possession requires open and notorious occupation hostile to the owner's interests, Hartman corrected. But you were not hostile, were you? You claimed to be guardians. You claimed to be family. You claimed to be acting in Lily's best interest while you drained the accounts. That is not adverse possession, young man. That is fraud. That is embezzlement. And since the trust is international, it is wire fraud. That is why the FBI is here. I stepped forward. I wanted them to look at me. You didn't just steal a house, I said, my voice dropping to a growl. You stole 15 years of my daughter's life. You made her a servant in her own kingdom. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone. You said I had no proof, Pamela. You told Lily that no one would believe a beggar over a respected socialite. I placed the phone on the granite table. The black surface reflected the device like a monolith. You forgot one thing, I said. Beggars have ears. I pressed the screen. The audio was crystal clear, amplified by the acoustics of the conference room. It was the recording from the kitchen the night I arrived. Brandon's voice filled the room, slurred and arrogant. You want the money for the boy? Clean it up. Not with a rag. With your tongue. I saw the FBI agents stiffen. I saw the sheriff's jaw tighten. Even Clive looked away, unable to maintain his facade of indifference. Lily let out a small whimper. She covered her ears, but she couldn't block out the sound of her own humiliation. I let it play. I let them hear the splash of the wine. I let them hear Brandon's laughter. Then I skipped forward. The recording changed. It was Pamela's voice, now sharp and commanding. Sign the paper, you stupid girl. Do you have any idea how much this costs us? And then Brandon again. The threat. I am calling the administration. I am going to tell them to pull the plug. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. That was yesterday, I said, looking at Brandon. You threatened to murder my grandson. You used the threat of his death to extort a signature. That is not just fraud, Brandon. That is a federal hate crime. That is conspiracy to commit murder. That is blackmail. Brandon was shaking his head back and forth, his eyes wide and wet. It was a joke, he whispered. I didn't mean it. I wouldn't have done it. You wouldn't have done it, I repeated. I walked over to him. He tried to press himself into the drywall. You made her lick the floor, I said softly. A man who does that, a man who enjoys that, is capable of anything. I turned to Pamela. She was clutching the edge of the table, her knuckles white. She looked like a statue of a queen watching her empire burn. And you, I said. You knew. You knew about the trust, didn't you? She didn't answer. She just stared at me with hate-filled eyes. Clive told you, I said. Years ago. He told you the house was in a trust. That is why you forged the death certificate. That is why you forged the power of attorney. You were trying to break the trust. You were trying to trick the bank into releasing the asset. I looked at Clive. He was wiping sweat from his upper lip with a silk handkerchief. Clive, tell them, I commanded. Tell the federal agents exactly how you planned to bypass the Swiss security protocols. Tell them about the fake biometric data you tried to buy on the black market. Clive looked at the FBI agents. He looked at the handcuffs on the sheriff's belt. He made a calculation. It was her idea, he blurted out, pointing a shaking finger at Pamela. She forced me. She said she would ruin me if I didn't help her. She said she knew about my gambling debts. She blackmailed me. You coward, Pamela screamed. She lunged across the table, trying to claw at Clive's face. You greedy little pig. You took 50%. You said it was foolproof. Hartman stepped in between them. That is enough, he said. We have the confession. We have the recordings. We have the forged documents. He turned to me. Mr. Conrad, the assets have been frozen. The accounts Pamela opened in your name have been locked. The house is secured. The eviction notice is effective immediately. I nodded. I looked at Pamela. You called my daughter a maid, I said. You made her wear rags. You made her sleep in the attic. You told everyone she was useless. I walked around the table until I was standing right in front of her. Today, Pamela, you are going to learn what it feels like to be powerless. I picked up the blue leather document, the trust charter. This document says that Lily is the beneficiary of the trust's income. Do you know how much that is? Pamela didn't answer. It generates $40,000 a month in interest alone, I said. For 15 years, that money has been accumulating. It has been sitting in an account, waiting for her. I leaned in close. That is $7 million, Pamela. $7 million that belonged to her. Money you couldn't touch because you didn't have the code. So you enslaved her instead. You made her beg for pennies while she was sitting on a gold mine. And do you know what the penalty is for embezzling from a trust protected by international treaty? Hartman asked, his voice cutting like a razor. Pamela looked at him, terrified. It is mandatory prison time, he said. Federal. No parole. And since you crossed state lines to forge the documents, we are looking at 20 years minimum. Pamela's legs gave out. She collapsed into the chair. She looked small. She looked old. The makeup couldn't hide the fear anymore. The diamonds on her fingers looked like glass. Lily, I said, turning to my daughter. She looked up. She was crying, but they weren't tears of fear anymore. They were tears of release. Come here. She walked to me. I put my arm around her. I felt her tremble, but I held her firm. Look at them, I said. Look at the people who hurt you. She looked. She saw Brandon cowering against the wall. She saw Clive sweating through his suit. She saw Pamela broken in the chair. They are not giants, Lily, I whispered. They are just thieves. And they are done. I looked at the sheriff. Sheriff Miller, I believe you have probable cause. Miller smiled grimly. He unhooked the handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked ominously. Probable cause, he said. Mr. Conrad, I have enough here to put them away until the next century. He moved toward Brandon first. Brandon Vance, you are under arrest. Brandon screamed. No! You can't, Mom, do something. Pamela didn't move. She couldn't move. She was watching her life disintegrate. I watched them. I watched the fear in their eyes, and I felt nothing but a cold, hard satisfaction. This was justice. This was the balance of the universe correcting itself. But I wasn't done. I had one more thing to say to the woman who had killed my wife's memory. Pamela, I said, as the officer moved toward her. She looked up. You said I was a rat, I said. You said I belonged in the dirt. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the $200 she had thrown at me. The two crisp bills. I dropped them on the table in front of her. "Keep it," I said. "You are going to need it for the commissary." Her eyes widened. She stared at the money, the symbol of her arrogance, the symbol of her downfall. "Get them out of here," I said. The room erupted into motion. The officers moved in. The shouting started, but I didn't hear it. I only heard the sound of my daughter breathing beside me, free at last. The room was a symphony of chaos, but to me it sounded like victory. The FBI agents were securing the perimeter, the sheriff was reading rights, but Brandon Vance was not listening. He was staring at the $200 I had thrown on the table. He was staring at the man he had called a beggar, the man he had threatened with a steak knife, the man whose daughter he had enslaved. His eyes were not filled with remorse. They were filled with the rabid madness of a cornered animal. He looked at his mother slumped in her chair, broken and defeated. He looked at Clive weeping into his hands. He looked at the life of luxury evaporating into the air conditioning. And then he looked at me. "You did this," he screamed. His voice was a raw tear in his throat. "You ruined everything, you old bastard. It was ours. It was all ours." He didn't think. He didn't calculate. He just snapped. Decades of entitlement boiled over into a singular act of violence. He pushed off the wall, his face contorted into a mask of pure hate. He lowered his shoulder and charged. He wasn't aiming for the police. He wasn't trying to escape. He was aiming for me. He wanted to hurt the source of his pain. He wanted to smash the face that had smiled at his destruction. Lily screamed a sharp, terrified sound that cut through the room. "Daddy, look out!" But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I knew something Brandon did not. I knew who was standing 6 inches to my right. His name was Marcus. He was 6'4", 250 pounds of muscle and kinetic energy. He had spent 10 years in special operations protecting diplomats in war zones. He had reflexes that made a striking cobra look sluggish. Brandon was a soft, drunk playboy who thought violence was slapping a defenseless woman. He was about to learn the difference between a bully and a warrior. Brandon covered the distance in 3 strides. He raised his fist, a clumsy telegraphed blow. Marcus moved. It was a blur of motion too fast to track. He stepped in front of me, his left arm deflecting Brandon's strike effortlessly. His right hand shot out, gripping Brandon's wrist. There was a pivoting of hips, a shifting of weight, and then a sound that made everyone in the room wince. Crack. It was the dry, sharp sound of a dry branch snapping in winter. Brandon's scream was immediate and guttural. It started as a gasp and exploded into a high-pitched shriek of agony. Marcus twisted the broken arm behind Brandon's back, forcing him down. He kicked Brandon's legs out from under him. Brandon hit the marble floor hard, his face bouncing off the stone. He writhed, trying to clutch his shattered arm, but Marcus held him pinned with a knee to the spine. "Stay down," Marcus said calmly, his voice devoid of exertion. "Do not move, or I will break the other one." Brandon sobbed into the floor. "My arm. You broke my arm. Oh God, it hurts." I looked down at him. He was pathetic. He was small. The arrogance that had filled the room 10 minutes ago was leaking out of him, along with his snot and tears. I stepped closer. My Italian leather shoes stopped inches from his face. "It hurts," I asked, my voice devoid of sympathy. "Good." Hartman stepped forward. He adjusted his glasses, looking down at the writhing man with the detached curiosity of a biologist examining a specimen under a microscope. He opened a new folder in his black box. "Brandon Vance," he said, his voice cutting through Brandon's whimpers. "You are under arrest. But not just for the fraud regarding the house. That would be too simple." Hartman pulled out a sheet of paper covered in red ink. "We have subpoenaed the phone records from the hospital administration. We have the logs of the calls you made threatening to terminate the life support for a minor. Brandon stopped screaming. He looked up, his eyes wide with a new kind of terror. We also have the testimony of the billing department, Hartman continued. You intercepted insurance documents. You created false invoices totaling $2 million. You used those false documents to coerce labor and solicit money. That is extortion, Brandon. That is wire fraud. Hartman flipped the page. But this is the one that will bury you. We have witnesses who saw you strike Lily Vance. We have the medical report of her injuries. And we have the recording of you using access to medical care as a weapon to torture a mother. That is Class A felony child abuse and endangerment of a dependent. Hartman leaned down, getting into Brandon's face. The district attorney is very interested in this case, Brandon. He doesn't like people who threaten sick children. He is talking about stacking the charges. 20 years for the fraud, 10 for the extortion, and 15 for the abuse. Consecutive, not concurrent. Brandon began to hyperventilate. No, I didn't mean it. It was just talk. I wouldn't have hurt the kid. You used his life as a bargaining chip, I said. I knelt down. My knees cracked, but I didn't care. I wanted him to see me. I wanted him to see the grandfather of the boy he had threatened. I grabbed a handful of his hair and pulled his head up. He tried to pull away, but he was pinned. He had to look at me. Remember the wine, Brandon, I whispered. He blinked, tears streaming down his face mixed with the dust of the floor. Remember what you told my daughter, I hissed. You spilled your expensive wine. You told her to clean it up, not with a rag, with her tongue. You made her lick the dirt because you thought you were a god. You thought you had the power of life and death. I let go of his hair. His head thumped back against the floor. Well, Brandon, the power has shifted. You are not a god. You are an inmate. I stood up, brushing the invisible dust from my suit. You like floors so much, I said, looking down at him with pure, unadulterated disgust. You like making people crawl. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a register that vibrated in the silent room. In prison, Brandon, you will be the one crawling. You will be the fresh meat, and when you spill your drink in the cafeteria, when you drop your tray, your new friends are going to teach you exactly how to lick the floor properly. Brandon wailed. It was a sound of total despair, a sound of a man who realized the nightmare was just beginning. Get him out of my sight, I said to the officers. The FBI agents hauled him up. He screamed in pain as his broken arm shifted, but they didn't seem particularly gentle. They dragged him toward the door. His feet dragged on the marble, leaving scuff marks on the floor he had once ruled. Mom, he screamed as they took him away. Mom, help me. Don't let them take me. Pamela watched him go. She didn't say a word. She couldn't. She was staring at the empty doorway, her mouth working silently. She had just watched her son, her golden boy, her partner in crime be broken and dragged away like garbage. The door slammed shut, cutting off his screams. The room was quiet again. But it was a different kind of quiet. It was the silence of a battlefield after the cannon fire stops. I turned to Lily. She was shaking her hands over her mouth. She had watched her tormentor fall. She had watched the monster who owned her fear be reduced to a weeping child. Is he gone? She whispered. He is gone, I said. He is never coming back, Lily. He will never touch you again. He will never touch Leo again. She let out a breath, a long, shuddering exhale. Her shoulders dropped. The tension that had held her upright for years seemed to snap. I looked at Hartman. One down, I said. Hartman nodded. He turned his gaze to the woman sitting at the table. The woman who had started it all. Your turn, Pamela, he said, opening the last file. The room felt bigger without Brandon's screaming. It felt cleaner. But the stain at the head of the table remained. Pamela sat there, her hands gripping the edge of the granite so hard her knuckles looked like polished bone. She was trembling not with fear, but with a vibrating, incandescent rage. She had watched her son be dragged away, and instead of breaking it, had hardened her. She looked at me with eyes that were black holes of entitlement. "You monster," she hissed. Her voice was low, a venomous rattle in her throat. "You come back here after 15 years, and you destroy my family. You throw my son in a cage. Who do you think you are?" "I am the man who paid the bills, Pamela," I said, walking slowly toward her. "I am the man whose house you lived in." She stood up, pushing the chair back with a screech of metal on stone. "I earned this," she screamed, slamming her hand on her chest. "I earned every penny I raised that girl. I took her in when she was a sobbing mess. I fed her, I clothed her. I gave her a roof over her head for 15 years. She pointed a shaking finger at Lily. "She was a burden, a useless, crying burden. I sacrificed my life for her. I sacrificed my youth to play mother to your abandoned brat. I have rights. I have a right to be compensated." Lily shrank back, the old conditioning kicking in. She looked down, shame burning her cheeks. I stepped between them. I broke the line of sight. Pamela had to look at me now. "You raised her," I asked, my voice deceptively calm. "I kept her alive," Pamela shrieked. "That costs money, Conrad. Food costs money. Clothes cost money. I used my own savings. I went into debt for her." I looked at Hartman. He was already opening the red file folder. He pulled out a single sheet of paper, a bank ledger printed on heavy watermarked stock. He handed it to me. I looked at the numbers, columns of them. Identical. Relentless. "You say you used your own savings," I said, reading from the page. "You say you went into debt." I slid the paper across the table. It stopped directly under her nose. "Then explain this, Pamela." She looked down. She didn't want to read it, but she couldn't look away. "It is a wire transfer log," I said. "From the Geneva Trust directly to the First National Bank of Boston. Account number ending in 4590. Your personal account, Pamela." Her face went gray. The rage evaporated, leaving behind the cold sweat of exposure. "On the 1st of every month for 180 months a transfer was made," I said, my voice rising, filling the room. $20,000, labeled clearly for the care and maintenance of Lily Vance. I leaned over the table, getting into her face. $20,000 a month, Pamela. That is $240,000 a year. That is $3.6 million over 15 years. I slammed my hand on the table, making her jump. $3.6 million, I roared. "Where did it go, Pamela?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She was drowning. I looked at Lily, I said, pointing to my daughter, who was staring at us in shock. "Look at her dress, Pamela. She is wearing rags. She is malnourished. My grandson is in a hospital bed because you said you couldn't afford the insurance." I walked around the table, stalking her. "You didn't spend a dime on her," I hissed. "You spent it on yourself." I saw the closet upstairs, Pamela. I saw the furs. I saw the shoes that cost more than a car. I saw the plastic surgery bills. You carved up your face with my daughter's money." "I didn't know," she blurted out. I thought it was an allowance from my sister's estate, liar," I said. "The transfers came from me. My name is on every single one. You knew I was alive. You knew I was sending money. And you kept it all. You stole $3.6 million from a child, and then you made her scrub your floors to pay for the food you bought with her own money." "That is embezzlement," Pamela Hartman said from the corner. His voice was the cold steel of the guillotine. "Grand larceny. Fraud by a trustee. But that is not the worst of it." Pamela looked at him, her eyes darting like a trapped animal. "The IRS," he said simply. Pamela flinched as if he had hit her. "You never declared that income, did you?" Hartman asked, adjusting his glasses. "You treated it as a gift. You hid it in offshore accounts. You spent it on assets you didn't report. He smiled a thin, predatory smile. We sent the logs to the IRS this morning, Pamela. They are very interested. They are talking about tax evasion, money laundering. They are freezing everything. No, Pamela whispered. You can't. That is my money. It was never your money, I said. It was blood money. And now it is gone. Hartman nodded to the sheriff. Sheriff Miller seized the assets. Miller stepped forward. Pamela Vance, he said, I am placing you under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion, and false imprisonment. He reached for her arm. Wait, she screamed, pulling away. You can't take me. I am a Vance. I have standing in this city. You have nothing, I said. I looked at her hands, at the diamond rings glittering on her fingers, rings she had bought while my grandson gasped for air. Take them off, I said. She clutched her hands to her chest. What? The rings, I said. The necklace, the earrings, the watch. Take them off. These are mine, she cried. They are personal property. They were bought with stolen funds, Hartman interjected. Under the civil asset forfeiture laws, they are proceeds of crime. They belong to the victim. They belong to Lily. Take them off, Pamela, I commanded, or the officer will take them off for you. She looked at the sheriff. He wasn't smiling. He held out an evidence bag. Do it, Ma, Am, he said. Don't make this harder. She began to strip. It was a slow, humiliating process. She pulled the rings from her fingers, her hands shaking so hard she dropped one. She unclasped the heavy diamond necklace. She took off the Rolex. She put them into the plastic bag one by one. With every piece of jewelry she removed, she seemed to shrink. The arrogance, the power, the facade of the wealthy socialite, it all vanished. Without the diamonds, she was just a thief in a suit she couldn't afford. She stood there bare, stripped of her armor. Is that all of it? The sheriff asked. Yes, she whispered. I looked at her shoes. Those too, I said. Conrad, please, she begged. They are Louboutins. You bought them last month, I said. With the money you saved by cutting Leo's medication dosage in half. I saw the pharmacy records, Pamela. Take them off. She kicked off the shoes. She stood on the cold marble floor in her stockings. She looked small. She looked pathetic. Everything you own, I said, my voice low and final. The cars, the clothes, the hidden accounts. The IRS is taking it all. You are leaving this room with nothing but the clothes on your back. You are going to prison, Pamela. And when you get out, if you get out, you will be destitute. You will know what it feels like to have nothing. You will know what it feels like to be a beggar. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw true fear in her eyes. Not the fear of getting caught. The fear of poverty. The fear of being ordinary. I raised her, she whispered again, but the words were hollow now, a mantra that had lost its magic. You didn't raise her, I said. You just fed off her. And now the host has cut you off. Get her out of here. The sheriff cuffed her. The metal clicked shut around her bare wrists. She didn't scream like Brandon. She didn't fight. She just slumped forward, broken by the weight of her own greed. They walked her out. She passed Lily. She didn't look at her. She couldn't. Lily watched her go. She watched the woman who had terrorized her for 15 years shuffle out in her stocking feet, handcuffs gleaming under the lights. When the door closed, the silence returned. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was clean. It was the silence of a storm that had finally blown itself out. I walked over to Lily. I took her hands in mine. Her hands were rough, calloused from work. But they were warm. It is over, I said. She looked at the empty chair where Pamela had sat. She looked at the torn pieces of the waiver on the floor. She is gone, she whispered. She is gone, I promised. and she took the debt with her. I looked at Hartman. He was closing the black box. His job was done. The sharks had been fed. "Hartman, call the car," I said. "Where are we going?" Lily asked, wiping her eyes. "To Switzerland," I said. She looked confused. "Switzerland." "There is a hospital in Zurich," I said. "The best in the world for pediatric heart conditions. They have a bed waiting for Leo. We are leaving tonight." "But the house," she said, looking around the room. "What about the house?" I looked at the mansion, the place that had been a prison. "Burn it down for all I care," I said. "Or sell it. Or give it away. It doesn't matter. It is just brick and mortar." I put my arm around her shoulders. "We are going to build a new home, Lily. A real one. One without ghosts." We walked toward the door. I didn't look back. The view of the city was beautiful, but I didn't care about the city anymore. I only cared about the daughter beside me and the grandson waiting for me. The ghost of Conrad Vance was dead. The father had returned. And this time he wasn't going anywhere. The silence in the house on Beacon Hill was no longer heavy. It was no longer the suffocating silence of a prison. It was the clean, fresh silence of a new beginning. For the last week, a small army of professional cleaners had scrubbed every inch of the mansion. They had stripped the carpets that smelled of Brandon's spilled wine. They had removed the gaudy art Pamela had hung to mask the classic architecture. They had boxed up every trace of the parasites who had lived here and incinerated it. Pamela and Brandon were currently sitting in cells at the Charles Street jail. Their bail hearing had been a massacre. Hartman had presented the flight risk evidence, and the judge, disgusted by the charges regarding Leo, had denied bail entirely. They were rotting in concrete boxes, wearing orange jumpsuits that matched the color of their greed. They would never see the inside of a luxury car again. I stood in the library, watching the medical transport team gently lift Leo onto a specialized gurney. He was sleeping. For the first time in his life, he was sleeping without pain. The best cardiologists in Boston had stabilized him, but the real work would begin tomorrow in Zurich. I had chartered a flying ICU, a private jet equipped to take us to the clinic that would give him a new heart if he needed one. Lily stood by the French doors looking out at the city. She was wearing a simple white dress I had bought her. It was clean. It was new. But she still stood with her shoulders slightly hunched, a phantom weight pressing down on her spine. The bruises on her face were fading, turning a soft yellow, but the scars in her mind would take longer to heal. I walked over to her. The city lights of Boston twinkled below us, oblivious to the war we had just fought. "The car is here, Lily," I said softly. "It is time to go." She didn't turn around immediately. She kept her eyes on the horizon. "Daddy," she whispered. "Yes, sweetheart. Why did you wait?" The question hung in the air, fragile and sharp. Why did it take 15 years? Why did I have to scrub floors? Why did Leo have to suffer? Why didn't you come back sooner? I felt a crack in my chest, a pain sharper than any physical wound. I moved to stand beside her. I didn't try to make excuses. I didn't try to tell her about the political coups, the frozen assets, or the nights I spent in a cell wondering if she was alive. None of that mattered to the girl who had been alone. I looked at her. I took her hand. It was still rough, but the trembling had stopped. "I didn't wait, Lillian," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I was fighting. Every single day for 15 years I was fighting to get back to you. I was buried under a mountain of enemies, and it took me a long time to dig my way out." I squeezed her hand. "I am sorry. I am so sorry I wasn't here to protect you. I failed you." She turned to me then. Her eyes were wet but clear. She looked at the man who had destroyed her tormentors. "You came back," she said. "In the end, you came back." I turned her to face me. I placed my hands on her shoulders. Listen to me, Lily. I want you to hear this, and I want you to believe it. I looked deep into her eyes. I missed 15 years. I cannot get them back. But I swear to you from this moment on, if anyone touches you, if anyone looks at you with anything other than respect, if anyone tries to take a single penny from you or your son, I will burn their world to ash. I let the steel enter my voice, the promise of the tycoon who had survived hell. You are not a maid. You are not a victim. You are a Vance, and we protect our own. She nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. She believed me. For the first time, she truly believed she was safe. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a piece of paper that had been taped back together. It was the waiver. The document she had signed in this very room under the threat of her son's death. The paper that said she was nothing. I held it up. You signed this to save Leo, I said. You were willing to give up everything for him. That makes you stronger than I ever was. I ripped the paper in half. The sound was crisp and final. I ripped it again and again until it was nothing but confetti in my hands. I opened my hand and let the pieces fall to the floor, drifting down like snow. You do not renounce anything, I said. I swept my arm out, encompassing the library, the mansion, the city beyond. This house is not a prison anymore. It is yours. The money is yours. The future is yours. I took her arm and guided her toward the door where the medics were waiting with Leo. This is your kingdom, Lily, I said, my voice ringing with pride. Now let us go save your son, and then you can come back and rule it. We walked out of the house, leaving the darkness behind. We walked toward the waiting cars, toward the plane, toward Switzerland. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The past was dead. The future was waiting, and it was going to be magnificent. I learned that the most dangerous enemies are often the ones sitting at your dinner table. Pamela and Brandon thought power came from abuse and theft. They mistook my daughter's silence for weakness and my absence for abandonment. They were wrong. True power isn't about how hard you can hit. It is about how long you can wait for the perfect moment to strike back. Never let anyone define your worth by what you have in your pocket. Dignity cannot be bought, and justice, though sometimes delayed, is always inevitable. If you are fighting monsters, keep fighting. The dawn always comes. If you enjoyed watching justice be served, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of retribution.